It was supposed to be a relaxing getaway, a chance to unwind at my lakeside cabin after months of grinding work. But when I came back a day early, I found my neighbor, the HOA's self-appointed enforcer, Karen, in a panic, fumbling with her phone to call 911, because I'd caught her red-handed listing my property online for thousands of dollars a night. My name's Alex, and I've owned a cozy lakeside cabin in a small community about 2 hours from the city for the past 5 years. It's a quiet spot, perfect for fishing, reading, or just staring out at the water with a coffee in hand. The cabin's nothing fancy, 2 bedrooms, a small kitchen, and a deck that overlooks the lake, but it's mine, paid for with years of savings and a lot of hard work. The community's tight-knit, or at least it used to be, until Karen moved in next door about 2 years ago. Karen's the kind of person who makes you question why you ever wanted neighbors. She's in her late 40s, always dressed like she's auditioning for a real estate agent role, with perfectly manicured nails and a smile that never quite reaches her eyes. She took over the homeowners association like it was her personal empire, sending out emails about community standards, and patrolling the neighborhood with a clipboard like she was the sheriff of a small town. At first, I didn't mind her. She seemed overly enthusiastic but harmless. That changed fast. It started with small things. Karen would knock on my door to complain about my grass being half an inch too long or my mailbox not being regulation size. Once, she left a note on my car because I parked it slightly off-center in my own driveway. I tried to be polite, nodding along, promising to look into it, but it was clear she thrived on control. The rest of the neighbors felt it too. At our annual HOA meeting, she'd lecture everyone about property values and maintaining the aesthetic, while most of us just wanted to grill burgers and enjoy the lake. Still, I kept my head down. I'm not one for confrontation, and I only stayed at the cabin a few weekends a month anyway. Last summer, I decided to take a 2-week trip to visit family across the country. It was the first big break I'd had in years, and I was looking forward to it. Before I left, I made sure everything at the cabin was in order. Grass mowed, windows locked, utilities set to low. I even asked my friend Mike, who lives a few streets over, to swing by once or twice to check on the place. I didn't think much about Karen at the time. She'd been quiet lately, probably busy harassing someone else about their porch decorations. I ended up cutting my trip short by a day. My sister had a work emergency, and I figured I'd rather spend an extra night at the cabin than crash on her couch. I got back to the lake around 8 p.m., the sun just dipping below the horizon, casting an orange glow over the water. As I pulled into my driveway, I noticed Karen's car parked across the street, which wasn't unusual. She was always poking around. But something felt off. Her car was idling, and I could see her silhouette in the driver's seat, hunched over her phone. I grabbed my bag from the trunk and headed to the front door. That's when I saw it, a faint light flickering inside my cabin. My stomach dropped. I hadn't left any lights on, and Mike would have told me if he'd stopped by. I crept closer, peering through the window. The living room looked normal, but there was a shadow moving in the kitchen. Someone was in my house. I pulled out my phone, ready to call the police, but then I heard Karen's voice from her car, loud and frantic. Yes, 911. I'm at 47 Lakeview Drive. There's a trespasser on the property. I saw someone go inside, and the owner's out of town. Please send someone right away. I froze. A trespasser. I was the owner, and I was standing right here. Why was Karen calling the cops on me? My first thought was that she'd seen someone else break in and was trying to help. But the way she was acting, parked across the street, watching my house like a hawk, didn't sit right. I decided to confront her before the police showed up and things got messy. I walked over to her car, my heart pounding. She didn't notice me at first, too busy talking to the dispatcher. I knocked on her window, and she jumped, nearly dropping her phone. "Karen," I said, keeping my voice calm but firm. "What's going on? Why are you calling the police?" Her face went pale, like she'd seen a ghost. "Alex." What are you doing here?" she stammered, clutching her phone to her chest. "You're supposed to be gone." "Supposed to be?" I repeated, my suspicion growing. "I live here, Karen. I came back early. Why are you calling 911 about my own house?" She fumbled for words, her eyes darting between me and the cabin. I thought you were a burglar. I saw someone moving around inside, And I knew you were out of town, so I... Karen, I just got here. I haven't even been inside yet. I pointed to my bag, still slung over my shoulder. So who's in my house? Her mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Before she could answer, I heard sirens in the distance. The police were already on their way. I didn't have time to deal with her nonsense, so I turned and headed for my front door, determined to figure out what was going on. Karen scrambled out of her car, still clutching her phone, and followed me, babbling about community safety and protecting the neighborhood. I unlocked the door and stepped inside, flipping on the lights. The living room was exactly as I'd left it, but I could hear footsteps in the kitchen. "Hello," I called out, my voice echoing in the quiet house. No answer. I moved toward the kitchen, Karen trailing behind me, still trying to explain herself. When I turned the corner, I saw a man I didn't recognize standing at my kitchen counter, holding a camera and a notebook. He was in his early 30s, wearing a polo shirt and khakis, and he looked just as startled to see me as I was to see him. "Who the hell are you?" I demanded. He held up his hands, the camera dangling from a strap around his neck. "I'm just a photographer. I was hired to take pictures of the place. I didn't know anyone would be here." "Hired?" I said, turning to Karen, who was hovering in the doorway, looking like she wanted to bolt. "Hired by who?" The photographer glanced at Karen, then back at me. "Her," he said, pointing. "She said she was managing the property for the owner." I felt the blood rush to my head. "Managing my property? Karen, what is he talking about?" Before she could answer, 2 police officers appeared at the front door, hands on their holsters. "We got a call about a trespasser," one of them said, looking between me, Karen, and the photographer. "Who's the homeowner here?" "I am," I said, stepping forward. "This is my house. I just got back from a trip, and I have no idea why this guy's in my kitchen or why she," I pointed at Karen, "called you." The officers exchanged a glance, then asked for my ID. I handed it over, along with a utility bill from my wallet that had the cabin's address on it. They nodded, satisfied, and turned to Karen. "Ma'am, you reported a trespasser. Can you explain what's going on?" Karen's face was a mix of panic and defiance. "I was just trying to protect the neighborhood. I thought someone broke in. I didn't know Alex was back early." The photographer, who'd been silent, piped up. "She hired me to take photos for a listing. Said it was her client's property and they were putting it on a rental site. I've got the emails right here." He pulled out his phone and showed the officers a chain of messages between him and Karen, detailing a plan to photograph the cabin for an online vacation rental platform. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "A rental listing? Karen, you were trying to rent out my house." She started backpedaling, her voice shrill. "It's not what you think. I was just helping. The cabin's empty most of the time, and I thought you could use the extra income. I was going to tell you." "Tell me," I snapped. "You didn't ask me. You broke into my house and listed it online without my permission. That's not helping, that's stealing." The officers stepped in, asking everyone to calm down. They took the photographer's statement first. He explained that Karen had contacted him a week ago, claiming she had permission to list the cabin on a site like Airbnb. She'd given him a key, my spare key, which I kept in a lockbox outside, and told him to come by that evening to take photos. He showed them the listing draft on his phone, complete with pictures of my living room, kitchen, and deck, along with a description that called it a charming lakeside retreat for $300 a night. I was furious. Not only had Karen violated my privacy, but she'd been planning to profit off my property while I was gone. I asked the officers if I could press charges, and they said I had grounds for trespassing and possibly theft, since she'd used my key without permission. They took Karen's statement next, but her story kept changing. First, she said she was managing the property, then she claimed it was a misunderstanding, and finally, she insisted she was doing me a favor by testing the market. The officers weren't buying it. They told Karen she'd need to come to the station to answer more questions, and they escorted the photographer out, since he was just a hired worker who didn't know any better. Before they left, I asked to see the listing on Karen's phone. She hesitated, but one of the officers told her to hand it over. Sure enough, there it was, a fully active listing on a popular vacation rental site, with my cabin's address, photos, and a calendar showing bookings for the next month. She'd already made $2,000 from people who thought they were renting my place. I felt sick. This wasn't just about the money, it was the betrayal, the audacity of someone thinking they could take over my home like it was theirs. I told the officers I wanted to pursue charges, and they noted it in their report. They also suggested I contact the rental platform to have the listing taken down immediately, which I did later that night. The company was apologetic, removing the listing within hours and refunding the renters who'd booked. After the police left, I sat on my deck, staring at the lake, trying to process what had happened. Karen had always been a pain, but this was next level. I called Mike, my friend who'd checked on the house, and asked if he'd noticed anything strange while I was gone. He said he'd driven by a couple of times and seen Karen's car in my driveway once, but he figured she was just being her usual nosy self. I wished I'd installed cameras, but I'd never thought I'd need them in a place like this. The next day, I went to the police station to file a formal complaint. The officer I spoke to said Karen was claiming it was all a misunderstanding, but the evidence, her emails, the listing, the key, made it clear she'd acted deliberately. They were looking into charges for trespassing, theft, and possibly fraud, since she'd been taking payments for a property she didn't own. I also learned from a neighbor that Karen had been bragging about side hustles at the last HOA meeting, talking about how easy it was to make money in real estate. It made me wonder if she'd tried this with anyone else's property. I reached out to a lawyer to discuss my options. He suggested suing Karen for damages, including the emotional toll and the cost of changing my locks and installing a security system. He also recommended sending a cease and desist letter to prevent her from retaliating or spreading lies about me in the community. I followed his advice, and within a week, Karen received the letter. She didn't respond, but I noticed her car was gone for a few days after that. Word around the neighborhood was that she was laying low, embarrassed by the whole ordeal. The HOA got wind of the situation, and at the next meeting, several neighbors pushed to have Karen removed as president. She didn't show up, which was probably for the best. A new president was elected, someone who actually cared about the community and not just power trips. I also installed cameras around my cabin, changed the lockbox code, and started spending more weekends there, just to keep an eye on things. Looking back, I still can't wrap my head around Karen's nerve. She thought she could waltz into my life, take over my home, and make a profit without me noticing. If I hadn't come back early, she might have gotten away with it for months. It's a reminder that you never really know what people are capable of, even the ones living right next door. I'm just glad I caught her before things went any further, and that the lake is still there, calm and steady, no matter what chaos Karen tried to bring into my life.